Hello, everyone. I'm Aaron Queen, the Director of School Safety, Security, and Emergency Management with Arlington Public Schools. I'm also a parent of 3 adults who came through Arlington Public Schools and 1 senior at Wakefield High School. With this being APS' second annual Emergency Preparedness Week, every day we had a different theme. Tonight's theme is gun safety, prescription drug safety, and suicide prevention. While our job is to safeguard the schools, the visitors, parents, students, staff, we know that we can't do this alone. We rely on our local law enforcement partners and our other county agencies. Tonight, we're so thankful to have Mr. Mark Perez, who is a prevention specialist with the Department of Human Services, to be with us tonight. On behalf of Dr. Duran and APS Schools, we thank you for your time to help safeguard our children.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us here tonight for this very important subject on suicide prevention and fatal accidents. My name is Mark Perez, and I'm a prevention specialist with Arlington County's Department of Human Services and the Children's Behavioral Health Bureau, Child and Family Services Division. Before we get started, I want to give a special thanks to James Miller and Aaron Queen with Arlington Public Schools for their collaboration with Child and Family Services and for their dedication to safety. I'd also like to recognize my prevention director who's here tonight, Lin Ye, who inspires his team and works tirelessly to ensure that we have a meaningful prevention program centered around equity for our youth and families in our community. Also, I'd like to highlight the endless guidance, passion for inclusion, and visionary leadership of our Bureau Director, Jamie Premdas. And I'd also like to acknowledge Tabitha Kelly, who is here with us tonight as well, the Director of Child and Family Services, Family Division, whose perpetual commitment to serving our community produces a long-lasting positive change in the lives of countless Arlingtonians. This event is part of a larger initiative from the Arlington County Manager's Office and the Department of Human Services ACES campaign that stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. Keeping someone who's at risk of self-harm safe and maintaining safety in the home are all efforts which aim to promote a healing and thriving Arlington community. For those in the room and those online, we ask that you please reserve your questions till the end of the presentation. My prevention director, Lin Ye, will join me to answer your questions afterwards. And for those in the room, you'll be asked to speak into the mic, which are in the front row. And for those online, you may be asked, you may type in your questions in the chat and someone will read it out to us. With that said, I wanted to convey that the topic we're about to discuss is sensitive and may evoke some strong feelings. So if you need to excuse yourself at any point or take a break, please do so. Self-care is very important. Should you need immediate mental health support, you may contact the Regional Crisis Center, also known as HopeLink, at 703-527-4077. Or, if you're more comfortable, you may text CONNECT to 85511. And with that, we'll begin. So let's go over our learning objectives for tonight. We want to be able to define lethal means and safety and how it is a part of a comprehensive approach to suicide and accident prevention. Here are the 3 points we'll be observing today. 1, learn about Lock and Talk program. 2, receive safety devices. 3, learn about resources, including training on identifying signs and symptoms of suicide risk. Now, what is Lock and Talk? Lock and Talk is a community initiative focused on suicide prevention by locking or reducing access to lethal means. It encourages individuals and families to securely lock up firearms, medications, and other potentially dangerous items to prevent misuse during a mental health crisis. And it promotes open conversation about mental health, encouraging people to talk about their feelings and seek help when needed. I'd also like to point out that Lock and Talk is a statewide initiative and an evidence-based approach to suicide prevention. And when we refer to the talk part in Lock and Talk, we're talking about something that involves engaging with the community, providing awareness, and increasing capacity to see that those who demonstrate signs and symptoms or risk and know how to intervene at that moment. This also includes being aware of various trainings in the community, including mental health first aid, which we'll discuss a little bit later. Through the distribution of free locking devices and educational materials, Lock and Talk also aims to create a safer environment and reduce the risk of suicide in the community. So, why is it important? Why is Lock and Talk so significant? Locking and safely securing or removing lethal means, such as firearms and medications, is one of the few proven strategies to significantly reduce or prevent suicide. Many suicides occur with little planning during short-term crisis, and about 90% of attempt survivors do not go on to die by suicide. And the talking about mental health challenges and suicide thoughts can reduce the pressure to act on them. Talking also includes sharing of resources and getting the right help to those who need it. Now, in the field of suicide prevention, there are 3 effective approaches to suicide prevention. The first is Lock and Talk. Second is CAMS, which is an acronym that stands for Collaborative Assessment and Management of Suicidality. It's an approach to treating people suffering from serious thoughts of self-harm. It is a therapist working with the client to determine and treat the root cause of suicidal thoughts. And at DHS, clinicians are trained at implementing CAMS with their clients. And the last approach that I'd like to mention is Care and Communicate, also known as CAC. And this involves love and caring letters. So when somebody is at risk, part of their safety plan is that someone close writes a letter to that person. Now I'd like to explore some signs of mental health decline. And this can be seen in 2 different categories. One is behaviors, and the other is physical. Let's start off with behaviors. Some of these signs include isolation from friends and family, extreme mood swings, engaging in risky behaviors, self-harm, increased alcohol and or drug use, and saying goodbye and giving away important items. Looking at the physical side, these include panic and anxiety attacks, change in eating or sleeping patterns, and we're looking at drastic changes, poor hygiene, and even scars of injuries from past suicide attempts. Now, many youth show 1 or more warning signs to their peers, parents, or trusted school personnel. Sometimes these signs are obvious or they can be subtle. Never ignore these signs. Suicide can be prevented with proper intervention, and warning signs don't always appear immediately following an incident, but may at a later point. It is important to be attentive by being good listeners and observers over time. Now, I'd like to provide a disclaimer. While these signs are concerning, they do not necessarily indicate signs that someone is planning on suicide. Keep in mind that the above list noticing symptoms that are out of the ordinary for the individual. I'd like to discuss now the myths and facts about suicide, some of which you may have heard. The most common one is that talking about suicide will actually encourage suicide attempts. And the fact is that talking about suicide encourages conversation and opportunity to get help. It opens up the dialogue. The next myth that I hear, or that we hear, is that suicide attempts or deaths happen without any prior warning. And the fact is that suicide warning signs may not have been recognized. The next myth is if a person attempts suicide and survives, they will not do it again. And the fact is that a suicide attempt is regarded as an indicator of further attempts. And lastly, only professionals, so only experts, can provide effective intervention for suicide. And the fact is that anyone who interacts with someone in crisis can help them by providing emotional support and encouragement. Now, we can't address the topic of suicide unless we are open to talking about suicide, and that's where the conversation takes place. And so, something I'd like to point out is, according to the Central Disease Control, CDC, in the US, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death. Suicide was the leading cause of death among persons aged 10 to 14 years old, and the third leading cause among those aged 15 to 24 years. Nearly 20% of high school students report seriously considering suicide, according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness. So, what's the relevancy of the safety devices? Why is that so important? Limiting access to medications and firearms is an essential strategy for preventing suicide. It helps prevent misuse and accidental drug overdoses. Now, once again, something to think about. According to the Centers for Disease Control, CDC, the drug overdose and poisoning increased by 83.6% from 2019 to 2020 among children and adolescents, becoming the third leading cause of death in that age group. This change is largely explained by the 110th% increase in unintentional poisonings from 2019 to 2020. Kids are at home more during the pandemic in that time. So, also, according to the CDC, once again, changes in mortality trends among children and adolescents during the early COVID-19 pandemic were specific to firearm-related injuries and drug poisoning. Let's discuss securing medication. Students begin to self-medicate around age 11. Without knowledge and training to make safe choices, accidents can happen. That's according to the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America and Johnson & Johnson. Once again, to cite the Centers for Disease Control, they report that by age 16, approximately 90% of adolescents report self-administering over-the-counter medications. And in 2018, America's poison centers managed more than 300,000 exposure cases involving children ages 6 to 19. More than half these cases involved medication errors and misuse. Now, in Arlington, 1 in 10 middle school students reported taking prescription pain medication that were not prescribed to them. And that is according to the Virginia Youth Risk Behavior Survey from 2021. So why is securing firearms so important? Studies show that when firearms are accessible, individuals are more than 3 times likely to die by suicide. That the majority of people who die by suicide use firearms 61% of the time. Now that's a national statistic. In Northern Virginia, the majority of people who die by suicide is 54%. So the best strategy for protecting a person at risk is to remove firearms from the home until a mental health crisis is resolved. However, when that is not possible, limiting access can help. And in 2020, firearm-related injuries became the leading cause of death in children and adolescents ages 1 through 19. From 2019 to 2020, the relative increase in the rate of firearm-related deaths of all types, which include suicide, homicide, unintentional, and undetermined, among children and adolescents was 29.5%, more than twice as high as the relative increase in the general population. Now, if you look to the yellow poster here on the slide here, you'll notice this is an example of an educational poster that my team uses to provide instructions on how to properly secure a firearm with one of our gun locks. Here are some examples of some safety devices that we have available in the community. The prevention team at Child and Family Services offers free cable and trigger locks and locking medication boxes, as well as medication disposal kits. Gun locks and lock boxes include information on safe handling and messaging, and tips to secure firearms and medications. Now, I want to draw your attention to the QR code in the middle of that page there, which directs you to a form which you can fill out should you need a safety device, and we'd be happy to mail it out to you. Some Virginia laws to keep in mind. Child endangerment. Penalties for recklessly leaving a loaded, unsecured gun in a way that endangers the life or limb of a child under 14 is a Class 1 misdemeanor punishable by up to 1 year in jail and a fine of $2,500. So, storing a firearm unloaded and secured puts you in compliance with the law and protects curious children from accidental death. It may even protect someone else in the home. Now, something to keep in mind is that if someone is feeling at risk or there's a mental health crisis in a home that has firearms, Arlington County Police are temporarily able to store firearms in the station, and you may contact them for further information on that program. I'd like to share some training opportunities and resources. Beginning with Mental Health 101. Mental Health 101 seeks to increase mental health awareness and education through a short 1-hour presentation offered to community members and organizations. And these topics include signs and symptoms of common mental health conditions, suicide prevention, and firearm storage safety. Mental Health 101 recognizes that mental health conditions are common, with about 20% of individuals experiencing a mental health illness in any given year. Largely because of stigma associated with mental health, people often do not seek help on how to respond to a mental health crisis. The other training that we have is a little bit longer, called Mental Health First Aid. Mental Health First Aid will teach you how to understand, identify, and respond to mental health and substance use emergencies or crises. And these topics include identifying common signs and symptoms of mental illness and substance use, and how to interact with an individual in a crisis. Now, Mental Health First Aid is an evidence-based training. Most of us know how to assist somebody in a physical emergency. We would call 911, or there's a good chance that somebody would know how to administer CPR. However, many do not know how to respond to a mental health emergency. With that said, I'd like to share some more resources. Starting with the top left there, you should see the Regional Crisis Call Center, also known as HopeLink. They are a nonprofit organization providing behavioral health, crisis, and suicide intervention services. They seek to change and save lives in our community by empowering hope, safety, recovery, wellness, independence, and community integration. Next, we have the mobile crisis known as CR2. They provide 24-hour rapid mobile response to all youth and individuals across the lifespan facing a mental health and/or substance use crisis. Their highly trained and compassionate counselors provide phone screenings and face-to-face assessments, intervention, and support. Next, we have REACH. They provide also 24-hour services to individuals of all ages with documented evidence of intellectual and/or developmental disability and individuals over the age of 18 years old and mental health and/or at risk of behavioral challenges. In the bottom left there, we have emergency services. With emergency services, they also provide 24 hours, 7 days a week, rapid assessment, intervention, and stabilization to individuals experiencing a mental health emergency. Available resources include immediate supportive counseling to relieve distress and prevent the crisis from worsening, development of a safety plan to prevent harm to self and/or others, and connection to resources and peer support. And the peer support includes individuals with lived experience. Next, we have the Children's Behavioral Health Care. And they assist in Arlington children and adolescents in overcoming their mental health challenges. They work with children and adolescents who experience stress, anxiety, substance use, feelings of hopelessness, depression, and other behavioral and other emotional challenges. Next, we have the Trans Lifeline. They connect trans people to the community support and resources we need to survive and thrive. And lastly, we have the Trevor Project. They provide crisis counseling for the LGBT individuals in need of support when struggling with issues such as coming out, LGBTQ identity, depression, and suicide. Their services are also offered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In summary, we encourage everyone to lock, practice safe storage of firearms and medications, talk, engage with friends and family to talk about mental health and safety. And lastly, educate. Educate yourselves and others about recognizing and responding to someone who is experiencing mental health challenges. In conclusion, you have the power to save a life. Let's work together to prevent suicide. Please review our resources and consider taking one of our trainings to become more informed by following the QR code there on that page. Thank you very much. At this time, we will take some questions, and as they come in, we will address them. Oh, yes. So if there are questions at this juncture, please type your questions in the chat, and we're hoping to answer them at this time. Okay.
Mark Perez, is this on? Yes, I have a question. I know a lot of the young kids and young adults, I know they might have mental health problems. It could be something happening in school, being abused in school, or it could be abused at home, or it could be a sexual incident at school, or a sexual incident at home, or anywhere. A lot of these young kids, they might not go to the Arlington Mental Health Services, but hopefully they do, because the stuff is out there, and you guys are providing it. It is on the internet, which is really great. I'm happy you guys are doing this. But my question is, I know they have counselors in school and stuff like that. Do the counselors really get more involved with the students when they see things going on? So there's not a lot of suicides going on with these young adults. I didn't realize it was so high, but I'm just curious, what are some of the school systems are doing, especially here in Arlington, you know, to try to notice more of these incidents and things going on with the kids to try to prevent maybe you're committing suicide or overdosing on pills, or like I said, it could be a sexual something going on. It's because all these things shouldn't be happening, and I'm just amazed that it's such a high number with our young children and our young adults. I'm glad Arlington County has all these different help, phone numbers, and assistance, you know, for these young people. But my question is, what are the schools doing? Because the schools see the kids all day long, and they see a lot of stuff going on and see how the kids are reacting in the class or outside the class. So a lot of these students in the schools must see things going on. So my question is, what are the schools doing? I guess they contact authorities and things like that. So Mark Perez, my question for you is, like I said, what are the schools doing to help out?
I think it's a question for Aaron, right? Or...
Aaron, would you like to answer the question? I have some thoughts on this too.
Thanks for your question, sir. A very good question. Arlington County Public Schools has invested a lot of resources in getting additional counselors for our students who may need those services, as well as we have many opportunities for students to report anonymously. Also through emails, we work closely with our law enforcement partners. For any sign of any criminal activity, we contact the proper authorities. We also very involved with Child Protective Services as well. Our goal is for all our staff, student, parents, is to report any concerning behaviors, no matter how small you think it might be. And with those concerning behavior, we do the follow-up and try to help the students with interventions and preventions to keep them safe, both physically, mentally, and emotionally.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron, for answering the questions from APS. I like to have additional comments from DHS, and from Department of Human Services, we collaborate very closely with APS in terms of providing prevention, screening, and treatment services that are related to mental health and substance use. I really appreciate you painting the very complex picture of youth and their struggles and their challenges, and some, you know, may lead to the point of being in crisis and maybe at suicide risk. But it really is all hands on deck in Arlington, particularly over the past few years in our collaboration, that we integrate very well with APS. We now have a number of school-based therapists. So these are clinicians from DHS, Department of Human Services, that are positioned in the schools to supplement the resources and the capacity of schools to screen and to provide treatment within the schools.
Okay, thank you so much, and I'm glad to hear that. And Arlington County, it seems like they're doing a big thing for mental health services. I appreciate all your help, Mark Perez, for coming out today, and I appreciate your help, sir, and the other gentleman who was just up here also making some remarks. So I'm glad also the schools are working with the other authorities also. I appreciate it, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you. What?
Are there any questions online? No? Okay.
Yes. Once again, thank you for taking the time this evening to listen to this very important subject. We are all in this together. This topic affects us all, and we hope, once again, that you're able to visit our webpage for further information and resources, and we welcome you to review that. Thank you once again. Thank you.